What if your problem's not actually closing? What if your problem is opening? Hey everybody, Dan Deigan here again for another episode of Sales Chatter, and I'm in the middle of my second run through Andrea Waltz and Richard Svensson's new book called Why They Say No. And something I wanted to talk to you about today, because I think it is so important, especially as we sit here towards the end of the year, facing challenges that we faced in the industry. I think you'd have your head under a rock to say there hasn't been challenges. I do believe they aren't even close to as bad as a lot of people bring it out to be. But I also believe that there is challenges. And when I say that, sales timelines are stretching out. You have to get more specific. You have to get more directional in your sales. Excuse me. You also probably in the end, it's a slower burn than it was before, right? So especially during COVID. I mean, if you had a truck, you had a customer during COVID. But one thing that stood out to me in this book that I wanted to talk to you briefly about today was the fact that in chapter, I don't even know what chapter this is, but they say the problem may not be closing, it may be opening. And I wanted to talk to you about opening a sales call. I think this is one of the most crucial points, and it seems like more and more the conversations I'm having with students and the conversations I'm having with professional salespeople is a lot along the lines of, I need that ICP, and I need to really start opening my sales with a better strategy. And last week, I believe it was, I shared with you guys the QCESP formula, and I'll run through it very quickly again, because I think it's a formula that really needs to hit home with you to keep it very simple. And here's my strategy for everything: 3 to 4 steps, and that's it. Like, if you're not going to adopt somebody's strategy and you're looking at creating your own, look at a 3 to 4 step maximum. And that way it keeps your entire opening simple. And here's what I mean by that. So number 1, like for my 3 steps in my opening, I look at number 1. What is the ideal outcome of the call? Like, what is my intention? Why am I making this call? So for you people on cold calls, your initial cold call, I don't believe, should be to try and talk or sell anything. Your initial cold call should be simply, hey, is there a time where we can schedule some time where we can have 3-4 minutes of your undivided attention? I probably didn't catch you at a good time. Again, my strategy, okay? So that's my first kind of tick in the call is I want my intention. I know my intention going in. So my intention is to get a meeting, get them in my world off of the phone. So preferably in a Zoom meeting or something like that. I love, seeing people's face as opposed to a phone call. So that's number 1, right? Number 2 is I'm trying to identify, are they even my ICP? And if I could do that before the call, I might even be able to eliminate 30 minutes of my time on that initial call, right? So I have these 2 things that I'm looking at, and sometimes I flip them, sometimes I reverse. Depends on kind of how I'm feeling when I actually get the person. If it's via email, I'll try an ideal client profile them as opposed to book a meeting, because email is a little bit more indirect, where I can send an email, he or she can answer me in 30 minutes and get back. So those are 2. And then my third one is I simply say to myself, okay, why do they buy? And those are my 3 for the first initial contact. I'm not trying to fulfill the why in the initial contact. I'm simply looking at those 3, right? And then my second call, I move into the fulfillment stage. And the reason I do that is because I want to keep it simple. So every time I have a cold call, I know I have these 3 things to look at. And then every time it's a secondary or third or fourth call, all I'm focusing on is fulfilling that why, right? It's part of my sales diamond method. It's pretty much the foundation of most of my sales training is this core concept. 3 steps, first base, second base, third base, home plate is a new customer. And as I'm speaking to more and more logistics managers and VPs and everything that we're going to start doing Clients Corner here on Sales Chatter, it's becoming more and more apparent that if we, well, think of it like this. At what point, and it just kind of happened, and I'm wondering if any of you have the details, I'd love to hear it. At what point did texting somebody to say, hey, do you have a second, become more polite than just calling them, right? So if you think about that for a second, that kind of goes, wow. I mean, I remember when I was younger, it was like, you just call people. It's like, hey, yeah. And now, even though, you can call anyone from anywhere, it's actually more polite. And there's actually studies on it that people have said, no, it's more polite if you text me first and say, hey, you got a second? Yeah, I do. And then call. And I see that. I see that process being more polite. I do it all the time. Don't know when I started doing it, but I started doing it. So if you think of that perspective, right, you're making an outbound call. And I'm talking specific cold calls, not emails, because I don't believe emails catch, or even video messages catch anybody at an inopportune time. Because if now is not a great time, don't check your email, right? It's the phone, it's the ringing, you're picking it up, you're in the middle of something, you're on your computer and you pick up your phone, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, why did I pick it up, right? I'm sure you've all done that. We've all done that. Traffic managers do it 30 times a day. You know what I mean? So for me, it's getting right to the point. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, I ask my first ICP question and I say, I know you wouldn't have time to answer this now, but is there a better time where we can get 3 to 5 minutes where I can just ask you a question like this and a few similar questions just to see if we connect? I'm not even worried if you're not looking for people now or interested. I just like a couple of minutes of your undevoted attention. Don't know if you might have it now, but if you don't, my intention of this specific call is just to book some time in with you. And you're showing them that respect, and you're showing them that it's not necessarily about right now. Like I'm not interested in any sale today. I'm interested in what your perspective is, the long term, and how we can actually get through it. So in their book, when they start going into opening the sale, right? That's the initial call. And it's funny because when they Googled closing the sale. So, obviously it's kind of like golf, right? They often say drive for show, putt for dough, right? So opening is the drive, putting is the closing, right? But it's interesting, when they Googled closing the sale, they got over 775 million results, right? And I look at that and I say, okay, when they Googled opening the close, they got 277,000. Or opening the sale, they got 277 million. So 3 times more popular closing the sale than opening the sale. However, if you don't open the sale properly, you can't close the sale, because you're typically on 2 different wavelengths. So I'll get into this more next week, but I just wanted to share that with you because it was kind of this aha moment this morning, just before we went live. And I thought, you know what? I got to share this with you because I'm going to start being a little more spontaneous in the communication. We are going to schedule. I've got a bunch of episodes already pre-recorded to schedule out, but I wanted to be a little bit more spontaneous and really want to know what you're thinking. Like, is opening the close a more difficult task, or is closing the business opening the sale or closing the sale? What's a more difficult business? And I'd like to give me your comments down below. Let me hear what you have to say, because I think I think a lot of people don't focus on the opening. Everybody's focusing on the closing. So it's just interesting thought on a Thursday morning going into, Christmas weekend. Maybe you got some time to do some work over the holidays and just start looking at your opening and seeing, like, what are you really doing in an opening that's benefiting you? Are you opening the sale in the positioning to close it? Or are you opening the sale just to make sales calls, just to prospect, just to build a pipeline? And how does that look, and where do you fall off? Some interesting points. Till next time, my friends, remember, go out there, make every call educational, and crush your sales. We'll see you soon.